Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to the second ever edition of the ESG Show. The ESG Show is aimed partly at the ESG community, partly at people who are interested in ESG, with the idea partly to sort of serve as an education and to encourage debate and discussion so that we can rehearse ideas. But it's also about flying the ESG flag as well, about evangelizing ESG to the wider community. So welcome, hope you enjoy it. So I had anxiety about anxiety this morning. I was going to start this week's show by saying it is Mental Health Awareness Week. And the theme this year is anxiety. And anxiety, of course, is an important topic. It's something that matters a great deal to people. Nothing so far in that statement to make me feel anxious. So far, so good. But the ESG show is a global show, and we have viewers from right across the planet. And this morning, I think I discovered that Mental Health Week is this week only in the UK. It's in Europe, in the EU next week, and in the United States it's all month. And I don't know about the rest of the world. So there we are. I was getting stressed about talking about stress this morning. But then again, some anxiety is good. That is why the ESG show is live. Right now, my three guests this morning are a bag of nerves, but this is good because it focuses us, I think. But you can be the judge of that. Now I'd like to introduce you to Shelle. Fantastic.
Hi everybody, and Michael, it's going to be such great fun today. I'm really looking forward to it. And yes, anxiety is so important, isn't it, to discuss and raise awareness on. So yeah, happy to be here today, and happy to have you all here in the audience as well. It's great to have you all here.
Thank you, Shelle, and you've eased my anxiety already. So Shelle's going to be Shelle Fantastic is literally fantastic, and she has over 25 years of professional experience in mental health services and is passionate about leadership and well-being. During lockdown, she founded her own company with a strong focus on empowering women in business, combining her expertise in mental health with an entrepreneurial spirit. Shelle aims to bridge the gap between personal and professional development, helping women achieve their goals while maintaining a healthy work-life balance. And Shelle will be co-hosting the show with me today. Also on the show today is Jonathan Hook. Good morning, Jonathan.
Good morning, Mike.
Jonathan specializes in feelings. He says positive feelings create the right mood. The right mood is good for productivity, and good productivity means more profits. Now, Jonathan, you and I, we've crossed swords. We worked together before at another conference, and the thing that sticks in my mind is you were talking about lizard brains, which really got me intrigued. Can you just enlighten us a little bit about lizard brains?
You've slightly triggered my lizard brain. The lizard brain comes from a work in the 1970s, the triune brain theory, and it's still a really good metaphor to explore mood and emotion. And the lizard brain, our brain stem, is where mood stems from. So just tension, anxiety that you were talking about, that can be a mood or it can be an emotion, and I'll happily pick that apart with you later in the show.
Thank you very much.
Fabulous. So I have Peter Abrahamsen here with me today, and I'd like to make some introductions regarding Peter. Quite an astonishing bio, actually. He is the Emotional Weightlifter, and I'm going to move on to that shortly because I'm really curious to know exactly what that is. But Peter is a seasoned psychologist and coach with 40 plus years career, spans various industries and levels of seniority, from the most junior to the most senior. He has a thorough understanding of business and the often very lonely life at the top of the company tree. Hi, Peter.
Hi, Shelle. Hi, everybody. Good to see you.
Peter, can you share with us quickly, what is an emotional weightlifter? I'm intrigued.
Okay. Emotional weightlifting come about because my clients tell me very often that when they are done with my sessions, they feel that a huge weight had lifted off their shoulders. So I lift their emotional weight. They do it themselves, actually. But it's a combination of therapy, coaching, and mentoring in the mix that is necessary for each person as we go along. So we jump from one to the other to the third, depending on requirements.
Fabulous. Thank you. Thank you for that. So,
Thank you, Shelle. Thank you, Shelle. Thank you, Peter. Before we move on, I just thought I'd very, very briefly mention next week's ESG show. Now, one of my favourite movies is the movie The Good, the Bad and the Ugly. And if you are familiar with that theme, you might be familiar with lines such as, my friend, there are two types of people in this world, those who come through the window and those that come through the door, or those who are with loaded guns and those with unloaded guns. If you don't know Good, the Bad and the Ugly, it was a Western starring Clint Eastwood, Lee Van Cleef and Eli Wallach. Now, I would paraphrase that and say there are two types of people in this world, those that watch the ESG show and those that don't. Because next week, the theme of the ESG show is ESG, the good, the bad and the ugly. And we will be joined by Grant Griffiths, a ambassador for the Institute of Risk Management, Prachi Shrivastava, a London-based ESG consultant, and Rob Cheesewright, an experienced environmentalist and media commentator, who will be co-hosting the show with me. So watch this space, or at least our LinkedIn page, for more.
Yeah, it's fabulous, isn't it? And we really hope you enjoy today's show. And, you can help us. You can, like, share the content. You can follow us. There's so many ways that you can be here and support us in this journey because it's really exciting.
And if you're interested in appearing on the show, please get in touch. You can email me on info@techopian.com.
And and just, everybody spread the word, because, we all help each other, right, Michael? We
do. And I've got in front of me here, share the content on LinkedIn. I'm not quite sure what LinkedIn is, other than it proves that I make typos when I'm typing. But please send us your questions and feedback during the show. And we will answer your questions during the show. And one more thing, on a commercial level, we want to make this ESG show as good as possible, as useful as possible to the ESG community, and to really evangelize ESG. And to do that, we need your help. We want to. So if you're interested in partnering with us, if you have something to say to the ESG community which you think is important, then please get in contact at info@techopian.com, and we can explore options.
Fabulous. Yeah. And, Michael, I spotted a tweet just recently, actually, and it says when a cohort of doctors who recently left the UK were asked what prompted them to go, they were 2 times as likely to point to workplace culture, burnout and stress as to financial reasons. I thought that was really interesting.
So it's not just about money then?
No, seemingly not. Seemingly, money isn't the driving force. Obviously, like it says, it's the burnout, the stress. And for me, it puts a real emphasis back on workplace staff well-being. I think it's absolutely vital, for staff retention, productivity, everything. I mean, it's just, it's quite, the statistics are quite fascinating.
Yes, fascinating. One of the first TED Talks I ever watched was a TED Talk from Dan Pink, and I quickly called it up this morning just to refresh my memory, and it's got 24 million views, so I'm clearly not the only person that's seen it. But Dan Pink talks about research from social science that suggests that for solving complex tasks, additional financial incentives, providing salary, etc., is seen as fair, do not lead to greater productivity. In fact, bizarrely, they can actually lead to the opposite of that. Anyhow, now there was a report recently, record numbers not working due to ill health. So mental health matters too. Jonathan, did you have something Some thoughts about that? Jonathan, you've done it. You're on mute.
There's definitely a link between both of those news articles. And when people talk about mental health, and they're always referring to poor mental health, not good mental health, which in itself is a challenge, the pathology of this lies within the culture and within the organization, not within the individual. But all the efforts that go in is to cure the individual of their mental health problems rather than address the pathology which lies within the organization. And so when we think about sustainability, human sustainability is the environment in which they're operating in and of itself, an environment that supports any kind of sustainability.
Okay, thank you for that. Peter, anything to add to that?
I think it's interesting when you look at that report, it shows whether you're financially inactive, as they call it, either through illness or because you're a carer or because you're tired. But I don't know if people are more ill now than they used to be, or if we're just more aware that we are and we take the appropriate action. So why do we get ill in the first place? Is it systemic at work, or do we take the illness from outside of work into the workplace and therefore blame the workplace? I'm not quite sure where it is, and probably a bit of both, but I think the awareness level of being ill and therefore unable to work is a lot higher now than it used to be. So I'm not convinced that people are just more ill. Maybe not, but we have to look at both sides of that coin.
Okay, thank you for that, Peter. And the next story we're looking at this morning was in Fortune magazines. How boards are responding to investor and political pushback on ESG goals. It says on the state level, Florida is leading the charge with 18 other states in a movement against ESG investing. The article cites David H. Weber, professor of law at Boston University and author of The Rise of the Working Class Shareholder, Labour's last best weapon, who says boards don't have an easy job ahead of them in the coming years, but ultimately boards are going to be responsible to incentives. He points out that states with the largest public pension plans, California, New York, Illinois, and Massachusetts, are all very supportive of ESG investing. There's just more dollars out there on the ESG side, he says.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's a tough one, isn't it, for leaders? You know, it seems to me that there's a pressure from, pension funds or the stakeholders, the labor market, and customers, but then from politicians in some US states, there is pressure to do the opposite. What can they do?
I guess there's no simple answer, really. Companies are stuck between a devil and the deep blue sea, I guess.
It's a tricky one, isn't it?
Yeah. Jonathan, Peter, any thoughts on that?
Just everything I know about sustainable businesses is most of the practices there are there to make the company better in the long run. And if you look at all the work that Warren Buffett's done, an extraordinary investor, the businesses he invests in are ones for long-term investments, and they are sustainable in that they're not focused on the short term. So I think people get hung up on maybe some of the politics around the E, the S, and the G, rather than what is the benefit to the business, which I think is a shame.
Along those lines, I think what people are mostly concerned about in general is what's in it for me. And when you have people sitting in businesses thinking, what's in it for me? Am I really into all of this? If you're a politician, am I into this? What's good for me? So I think there's a lot of personal conflicts there as to what you want to invest in, who you want to be as a business. Do you believe in it or not? If not, don't do it. If you don't believe in it and do it anyway, you'll be ending up in this greenwashing type of scenarios all of a sudden.
Absolutely. And I think now we turn to our interviews, and joining me here today is Peter Abrahamsen, as I introduced earlier. Peter, you're talking about trust. Well, let me trust you to give a summary here. Tell me more.
Yeah, trust, not the kind where you put money into get it away from the tax man, but the trust that is between people. So business is not about business, in my opinion. It's about relationships. And the better your relationships are, the better your business will be. But it all starts with the relationship with yourself. And if you have a good relationship with yourself, you will also treat people accordingly. But there's one big component that underpins all of this, and that's trust. First of all, you need to trust yourself, and then you need to trust others. And the more you trust others, the better your relationships will be. And in turn, the stronger your business will be. Because we're all people, we need to trust each other to make things work.
Absolutely. Great points there. But should we trust everybody with everything?
No, is the simple answer. But we can either trust people because we trust people. But when we do that, we need to figure out what can we trust them with. And there are things we shouldn't just tell everybody. Not everybody needs to know everything. So HR records, for example, you need to keep confidential from everybody else except the person involved. There will be legal matters. There will be technical stuff. There will be financial things that you should keep from most people and only share with a few people. And this is why it's important to figure out who can I actually trust, and are they trustworthy? Will they keep this quiet? So you have circles of trust, those who trust with everything, and then less and less and less and less. So no is a short answer. You shouldn't trust everybody with everything.
Absolutely. And why do you think it's so difficult for people to trust each other?
I think you don't have a business without people in it. So people come from outside the business into the business, and they bring their baggage with them. So if you're someone who has been burned, let down, cheated on, whatever in the past, you might grow this idea that you can't trust anybody. I have a client whose dad tells him, don't trust anyone. And he goes along those lines and his life becomes difficult. So we grow up, we learn from different scenarios, different people, that we shouldn't or can't trust other people. And yet we still need to trust people to make things work. And then you have this inner conflict. You sit on the fence, should I not?
Absolutely. And, trust is important, isn't it? But, I guess what are the risks of not trusting someone, in this setting?
It's a twofold question. There's a risk of trusting and there's a risk of not trusting. So the risk of trusting somebody is the personal risk. What happens if I trust another person? Shelle, if I trust you, will I go and feel like an idiot afterwards because I couldn't trust you? So that's a little fear going on there that we what if about what could happen if I trust somebody. So that's on the personal level. Then let's go into the business and say, well, what's the risk of not trusting? Well, imagine you work in a place where nobody trusts each other. You will be spending your time covering your back, worrying if somebody's going to nick your idea, if somebody's going to talk badly about it, whether you still have a job tomorrow. So everyone involved focuses on that, and they forget why they're there. They forget to deal with the clients. They forget to do proper work. They just focus on not trusting anybody. What happens if I do? What happens? Can I really? So it takes away the focus from what you're there to do. And then your business is heading for stagnation, and then it goes downhill because everybody is focused on something completely different to what they were supposed to be doing.
Yeah, I get that. Great point. So I guess, it begs the question, is trust the same as vulnerability? Or is it a weakness,
I get that question a lot, actually. It's neither. It's not a weakness, but it is definitely a strength. Let me illustrate that with a real life example. I'm working with a senior person in the company at the moment on a coaching basis, and she has just been part of telling all the employees in the organization that the company is in a difficult position, not because they're doing something wrong, but the market is simply not there at the moment. So there's not enough work going through. They've had to make a redundancy or two, and the projects that have been put on hold, and owner has taken a step back in terms of money he takes out of the business, that sort of thing. They trust everyone with that information and with being honest and actually vulnerable about, hey, we're in trouble, but not desperate. We're not keeling over. What happens? everyone pulls together, comes up with ideas and thoughts, and want to pull their weight in order to get the out of that temporary match. Now, they could have chosen this team to nothing and pull the wool over everybody's eyes and then come up with some lame stories about what was going on, and then people would probably have left. Now, being trusted with the truth, they give the trust back and say, okay, let's get through this. What can I do? What can I do? What can we do? So trust breeds trust, and mistrust breeds mistrust. So it is totally a strength to be strong enough in yourself to be vulnerable and tell the truth, and then trust that other people will take it the way it's intended.
Yeah, great insights there. Thank you so much, Peter. Michael.
Thank you, Shelle. Thank you, Peter. Now joining me now is Jonathan Book, and Jonathan specialises in the biology of business, in particular feelings, mood and emotion, and the role they play in stress, energy, health, performance, and pretty much everything else in the organisation. So Jonathan, your topic is mood, or mood, emotion, and the biology of sustainable high performance. Please enlighten us.
Yeah, there's a lot to say. I'm even just picking up on two words that have come through today. You were talking about anxiety at the beginning. Peter's just been talking very eloquently about trust. They're both feelings. They're both felt. You can't think them. They're felt, and their root lies in our biology. And the biological route or pathway to that is through our moods and our emotions. And business psychology has dominated business leadership development, business thinking for decades and decades. And it sort of has ignored the biological reality that underpins that. So we know from metadata from the World Health Organization that 80% of poor mental health, mental ill health, stems from dysregulated feelings, dysregulated mood and emotion. So clearly understanding what mood and emotion are, what they do to our biology, is critical in achieving good mental health. And good mental health is needed for sustainable high performance. It's needed for high performance. It's needed for sustainable high performance. But they're not in and of themselves, they're not negative or positive. Your anxiety earlier, as I felt before I was talking, was completely appropriate. I was uncertain about would the tech work, was what I'm going to say going to resonate and make sense and be of value to the audience. So that anxiety releases energy in me. It focuses me to enable me to hopefully do a better job. Once this job is done, my screen just went blank. Once this job is done, that anxiety will die down and it will dissipate, and I'll be back to sort of some kind of contentment.
Okay, I thought we lost you for a moment there.
Yeah, so did I. Another spike.
So why do you feel biology is so important?
Well, it's just massively underrepresented. And when we've been doing these workshops for years now, and it just gives people a very different lever of control to enable them to do their job as a high performing leader or worker or whatever it is, because biology underpins so much of what we do. Just, picking up on that trust thing, and that Peter was talking about. Trust is founded in our biology. If we are not believing the person in front of us, so we can read through empathy how they are feeling. If what they are saying is not congruent with what they are feeling, distrust is born, disengagement is born. If what they are saying matches what they are clearly feeling, we are then likely to be trusting and therefore engaged. So distrust and disengagement stems from our biology, our feelings. So it's it gives a very mechanistic lever for people to grab hold of. You talked about anxiety. That can be a mood. So we can feel anxious because we've slept poorly, we're under-resourced, or we can feel anxious because we haven't eaten, so we're under-resourced, and that mood needs to be restored. Or you could feel anxiety because you're uncertain about something. You're uncertain about meeting a new person. You're uncertain about a new project. That is an emotional thing. It's external to you. So understanding what they are is important in dealing with them, dealing with the biological stress that is mood and the biological stress that is emotion.
Okay, thank you. So mood and emotion, are mood and emotion different? And does that matter?
Yeah, yes, they are, and yes, it does. So mood is an internal biological signal. It's a biological signal that changes our biology. It is biological stress that is focusing on our internal survival, getting us back to homeostasis. So, for example, if our blood sugar is low, it changes our mood. If our temperature is out of whack, it changes our mood. And we're constantly fighting to get back to homeostasis because that is where we are at our best. So mood is an internal signal. And to turn it off, to dial down the biological stress, we need to restore through our diet, through sleep, through movement, through daylight, through other people. Emotions are a biological signal, biological stress about our external environment. So they typically come from a someone, but it can be a something. They too need to be resolved to turn off the biological stress that is that signal. So knowing which one it is helps you determine which pathway you need to take in order to resolve that biological stress. So recognition is critical, self-awareness, and many people that we work with in business are completely unaware of how they're feeling. They've lost the ability to feel themselves and know what to do with it. And then it's self-management. What do you do to turn that biological signal off to get back to homeostasis, to give you the maximum bandwidth to deal with all the things that you've got to deal with? If you are biologically stressed, all external factors are stressful.
Okay, thank you. And so presumably, when your screen goes blank, when you're in the middle of a live broadcast, that raises your stress levels a fair bit, I would imagine.
Yeah, it does. It's the other stress pathway. That's the adrenaline pathway, which is extremely short-lived. You know exactly what it's about. But the more insidious pathway is the cortisol-linked pathway. So, for example, if you have a very irregular diet over a period of time and your blood sugar is spiking and crashing, you move away from hormone management through insulin and glycogen, and you move into cortisol hormone blood sugar management. Well, then you are living permanently with a stress hormone and permanent low-level biological stress, which in turn makes dealing with things outside of you, work, relationships, harder. You have less executive brain capacity to deal with those things because you are already biologically stressed.
Fascinating. And then bringing biology into the issue of trust. So what role does biology play in trust?
As I said earlier, it's a link to all of those things. It's a link to how we feel. So if I'm looking at you and I can see that you're agitated or worried, a bit like the example that Peter gave, the business leader would have been agitated and worried about the survival of the business. So if they'd have gone up the front and said, "Oh, everything's hunky-dory," what they're saying is incongruent to how I know they are feeling. At that point, distrust is born, and from distrust comes disengagement. I'm going to go, this is an uncertain future. This person doesn't know about that. I haven't got a plan there. I now am also riddled with uncertainty, and that might motivate me to withdraw from the business. So I'm disengaged, and it might even motivate me to depart because I need to resolve now how I feel about that.
Peter, thank you very much. That was absolutely fascinating. And we'll have to get you back to talk some more about this stuff because that is very, very interesting indeed. So Peter will be joining us again, along with, I beg your pardon, Jonathan. Peter just then. So that's going to get my blood sugar going. Jonathan will be joining me, Peter, and Shelle again in a few minutes for our group discussion today. In which we're focusing on bullying. Before I say that, let me just say a few things to you, the audience. This is a real global event. I'm speaking to you from the UK, and this morning all our guests are in the UK. Last week, one of our guests was in the United States. Next week, one of our guests is speaking to us from Turkey. But today, we're all UK based. But we've got viewers from all over the world, including from Brazil, France, Pakistan, and the United States. Just right now, viewing us. So that's absolutely fantastic. I don't know whether you can, if I've got anything to tell you about what our audience is saying. I'm so sorry if I pronounce this badly. Please accept my apology. But Maha Al Kanusi, it would probably help if I had my glasses on. Karusi, I beg your pardon. That's not my ignorance. That's me not wearing glasses. When we're looking at society, we're also looking at the political and economic system we're embedded into. So society in ESG will look different from Sweden to Qatar. It's easy to look at ESG goals from a state capacity that picks and chooses what's right for it. But what will ultimately be a free tick box exercise for corporates within that state rather than meaningful change? So thank you for that comment, Maha. I hope I pronounced that correctly. That was very insightful. Dora Lutz says, it's a frustrating time to watch this get stuck in culture war in the US. I agree with you there. If it's helpful, I wrote on a blog post about this. Dora Lutz, well, thank you very much. What you could do is on the ESG Show Techo group chat is, I don't know whether you're a member of it or not, but if you're not, please join and post the link on there, and that would be fantastic. And also Dora says, love the clarity that we don't have to share everything with everyone. Thank you for that, Dora. And Eric Villapro, people of my age, 60-ish. I know the feeling. I know the feeling, Eric. Yeah, I know what it's like to be 60-ish. Have been educated to put their feelings apart. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. I've been, all my life, I was taught to hide my feelings, to hide behind a veneer of coolness, of indifference. Physical feelings as well as psychological ones. Do you think, so this is a question for our panelists today, do you think younger generations are better prepared to deal with mental health? Peter, any thoughts about that? Are younger generations better prepared to deal with mental health?
That is a really good question, and I am not convinced I have the answer to that, because it's not a yes or a no answer. I think the younger generation's attitude to talking about mental health and to accepting that mental poor health is also a feature of life is far higher than what those of us in the 60s, yes, I'm one of them, were ever trained to acknowledge. Are they better prepared? I don't know, but I think they are more open to the fact that life has its ups and downs as far as physical and mental health is concerned. And they do something about it.
Absolutely. I mean, I could add to that as well. I mean, I think, we're working, really hard on reducing stigma, raising awareness, making help and support more accessible. I know certainly, whilst I'm not in the 60s-ish just yet, I'm heading towards it eventually. I know for my generation and my elders as well, there was much more stigma around mental health issues. I think the younger generation, people seem to be able to talk more openly about it, and that has to be a start. Being able to talk about it without fear of being judged or whatever is very important. So I'm hopeful that things can continue to improve, but we're not quite there yet, I don't think.
Yeah, just a quick add. We work with loads of organisations, and they all have a cultural legacy to varying degrees of strength. That talking about how you feel is unprofessional. Yet, as we know from metadata from the World Health Organization, mood and emotion, when they become dysregulated, account for 80% of poor mental health globally. So What I do think younger generations have, and this is anyone pretty much under the age of 40, it feels to me like they're much more comfortable to talk about it, and that in itself helps deal with poor mental health or support good mental health.
Absolutely, and I think this is why it's so important. I read an article just, I think, only yesterday on the news. Some statistic: 1 in every 14 employee is on the long-term sick due to stress, emotional burnout, whatever. That's huge. This needs more talking about. Because it's so important. I'm quite passionate about it.
Okay, thank you. And we've got one more question from Eric Villapru again, who commented earlier. And Eric is very lucky because I think she's in her 20s or possibly her 30s, but she's definitely young enough to be my daughter anyhow. And indeed, literally she is, because I've got 2 daughters in their 30s. And she says, I do see many of my friends and family members around my age, 20s and 30s, talking about mental health and seeking help, which is great. But it also feels like so many people are suffering from burnout, depression, and anxiety. I wonder if that is because we are talking more about it, or if there's something else behind it. So are we making people feel burned out because we're talking about it all the time? Or are we talking about it too much, do you think? Or can you never talk too much about these things?
It's fascinating. It's a fascinating question, isn't it? It's a great question. And I think, whilst we're raising awareness, are we talking about it too much? That's a great question, and, I suppose it's about, a lot of our reactions as human beings, if you're working, maybe 90 hours a week or something like that, you're going to feel burnt out. You're going to feel absolutely exhausted and everything else that comes with it. So I suppose it's a bigger, I don't know, it's a bigger picture. I don't know. It's fascinating. What's our panel's thoughts on it?
I have a thought, if that's okay. I think the younger generations, as we so lovingly call them, they're just as valuable as the older ones. But I think these days we have so much more input. We've got social media, we've got mobile phones, we're always on. And that adds another layer of stress and activity. So we tend to not relax as much as we did before. And there's an awful lot that needs to be done using 2 fingers on a phone. And we can't just go and blame the workplace all the time. We have to look at everything in its complete context. And there is a context outside of work that will impact on how we deal with work and vice versa. So I don't think the younger generations are more fragile than the older ones were. I think they have different pressures on them than the older generations did. I think they are in some ways better equipped to deal with certain aspects of life than we were. But we did not have the same things to deal with. So I find it difficult to compare and contrast completely between the generations.
Yeah, I totally agree with Peter. The environment in which we live is very different. And increasingly, the environment in which we live in is so far removed from the environment through which we evolved in over hundreds of millions of years. And that mismatch is at the root of a great deal of health issues, both physical and mental health. And physical health, we look at things like a huge rise in things like diabetes. They have a profound impact on mental health. And what's also important is that we all have mental health all of the time. And it is quite normal to feel anxious or tense or depressed sometimes. But if you find yourself stuck or coalescing around those more negative traits, mood descriptors, then it's a worrying, and dealing with that is critical. And I think the literacy around mood and emotion and the role that they play in good mental health is just not there at all, across all generations. I think younger people are more happy to talk about it, but what to do about it, I think, is still woefully inadequate in nearly every organisation that we work in.
Thank you, Jonathan. Now, my stress levels rose just a little bit then because I named the person who asked that question. I gave them the wrong name. So apologies to that. The person who asked that last question It's in fact Nania Hurley. So sorry about that, Nania. And sorry, Eric, for accusing you of being in your 20s. And congratulations, Nania, for still being in your 20s. I envy you. We now turn to our group discussion. And I will say in advance that this is going out on LinkedIn Live and we have a hard stop at 1:50. This broadcast stops at 1:50. So this discussion is going to have to be pretty quick. But the topic of today is bullying. And in the UK, until recently, the Deputy Prime Minister, Dominic Raab, was fired for bullying. And he said the bar is too low. And he talked about the report that looked into his proceedings. And he said it's adverse findings set a dangerous precedent for the conduct of good government. And he added, ministers must be able to give direct critical feedback on briefings and submissions to senior officials in order to set the standards and drive reform the public expect of us. In setting the threshold for bullying so low, this inquiry has set a dangerous precedent. It will encourage spurious complaints against ministers and having a chilling effect on those driving change on behalf of your government and ultimately the British people. So I guess this all boils down to a question of where does setting tough targets rigorously enforced end and bullying begin? Peter, Shelle and Jonathan will all be joining me for this discussion. Has the line between bullying and critical feedback blurred? So bullying, that's one thing. Critical feedback, that's okay, isn't it? Where does one end and the other begin, do you think?
I think it does link to what Peter was saying earlier about trust, because if critical feedback has to work two ways if it's to be authentic. So I would love to know how high the bar was set for Dominic Raab to be given feedback about how he made people feel and the impact that had engagement and therefore the productivity and performance of the people for whom he was so critical of. You know, these things are a product of the environment in which they operate. There are other government ministers who achieve a lot of things very quickly, also working with civil servants, who don't seem to have that problem. So I strongly suspect the bar has actually been set too low, and that's in terms of the leadership capability of the person running that department rather than the ability of the people within that department.
To me, it just screams this is a toxic work environment if we even have this debate about that department, because that shows that they're not able to have that open and honest conversation with each other about the subject matter. It goes and becomes personal. And, you know, not working there, not having been in it at the time, I can't really comment very specifically on what was said and what was not said and who's too fragile and who's too tough. I don't know what's going on. But the fact that this has all blown up like that means that the working environment is already toxic for whatever reason. And of course, there will be two sides of the coin.
Absolutely. There's always two sides of the coin, isn't it? And it's very difficult to unpick that, you know, when we weren't directly involved in that. But I agree with you there as well in terms of, you know, the fact that this discussion has been triggered tells you that, you know, there's already a problem there, and how they solve it, you know, is another matter, isn't it?
It's a bit like all these organizations that have myriad policies in place. If by the time you're getting to use policies to resolve a situation, it's already far too late. And the inability to have honest two-way conversations that allow people to develop and progress ideas. Everything in that environment, like it is in nearly all work environments, is about human interaction. And if it's not possible or it doesn't feel good to have human interaction, you won't have it. And that just leads to dysfunctionality, poor performance, and all the other things that clearly were a problem in that environment, but true in many other organizations.
Okay, thank you. So what's the difference between bullying and harassment?
Well, harassment is illegal. Bullying is not illegal. Bullying is typically and classically when one person seeks out a victim and makes life difficult for that person. Harassment is when you are attacking a person's characteristics, such as hair color, skin color, religion, race, gender, whatever. It goes to personal characteristics. That's illegal. And bullying is when you simply pick a victim. You pick the weak one in the playground and you have a go at him or her. That happens in the workplace as well. And this is why I have a bit of a problem with talking with this being called bullying, because it seemed as if there was a number of people there being unhappy with this particular minister's behavior. So was it rather wholesale bad behavior, or was it wholesale, oh, we can't deal with someone actually challenging what we're doing type of thing? Because if it was bullying, it should have been one person raising the flag.
Okay. Shelle, sorry, I interrupted you.
Sorry, I was just going to say, it's muggy water, isn't it? Because it's often how it makes the person feel. How does the treatment of another leave you feeling? Because one treatment of one person might make one person feel quite differently to another, and so it's quite a deep pond to dive into, isn't it? And but definitely one that needs tackling.
Yeah, when we think about emotion, we have 5 mammal needs. We have a need to be included, a need to be treated equitably, a need for certainty, a need to feel valued or a sense of attachment, and a need of autonomy. So if those needs are met in our environment, and the person who leads that environment creates an environment where those needs are typically met, we're going to feel good. If we're in an environment where those needs are continually triggered, we have uncertainty, we feel excluded, we don't have autonomy over our work, etc., we're going to be triggered and we're going to feel bad. And furthermore, through empathy, other people will feel that badness with us. So you kind of have this kind of outbreak of not feeling good. Now, whether that's bullying or not, I don't know. It's a very good example of very poor leadership. Leading by how you make others feel is at the heart of good leadership. We all know we've had a great leader and they've made us feel good. And the ones that we weren't classing as great made us want to leave.
Okay, now, I don't want to bully you. I apologize for bullying you. But we are almost out of time. So I'm going to ask you to try and answer the next question in 20 seconds each, which is, are certain behaviours described as bullying when in fact that is not the case? Peter, 20 seconds.
I think it depends on where you're looking from it. Bullying is always called out by the victim. I have never come across bullies holding their hands up and saying, hey, I'm a bully.
Well, I just said it. I just said I was a bully. Jonathan, can I bully you into answering in 20 seconds?
I haven't really got much to add. I don't particularly think that's bullying behaviour, Michael. But no, I haven't really got anything to add to that.
Okay. And
yeah,
Shelle?
and I'd just agree with with Peter there, and also Jonathan. It like you say, I've never come across somebody that's openly said I'm a bully. It's normally called out by the victim, isn't it? And and that's certainly been in my experience. Well,
thank you. I am so delighted to discover that I wasn't bullying you after all just now. There was the thing I was. It's a really good conversation, and I'm hoping we can continue this conversation at a later date because we're out of time. But I think that was very, very interesting. So thank you all very, very much indeed. And thank you, Shelle, for co-hosting with me. And Shelle will be co-hosting with me again in 2 weeks' time. So you ready? Peter and Jonathan will, I am sure, be joining us back on the ESG show in the not too distant future when we can hear more about lizards and weightlifting. So thank you very much, guys. Thank you all for joining the ESG show, and see you next week, same time. ESG, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Thank you.
Thank you.